My name is Andrea McDonald. My day-to-day life involves working, helping with homework, and autism. So we're at different therapies, be it speech, OT, ABA who comes to the house, and then just getting the kids dinner, ready for bed, and starting all over the next day. My typical health checkup scenario is usually my annual physical with my internist and the annual checkup with the OBGYN. So when you go for the annual OBGYN, you're told that you need to get a mammogram once you're turned 40 years old. So I did my first one when I was turned 40. That would have been in 2021. So I did my mammogram and everything came out perfect. So when it was time to get it in October of 2022, I decided, well, everything was fine. I can skip 2022 and just go in 2023. And the company that did it the year before, turns out when it's the following year, you don't need a prescription or anything. They just call you. So they would send me text messages. I would delete them. They would send me emails. I would delete them. And then one day I got a call from the representative to schedule an appointment. And I said, fine, I'll come in. Went in and had the mammogram. And then I got a call from my OB/GYN saying that they saw something and they need me to go back. So of course, I'm like, oh my God, like, is everything okay? And they're like, oh, it's normal. And I spoke to other females who were like, yeah, it happens, especially African Americans. We have dense breasts, things like that. So a lot of times we do have to go back in and get a second mammogram and a ultrasound. So I'm like, okay, no problem. So I go in and, you're waiting. And I remember in front of me, there's a sign that says, like if they see anything, you have to go for a biopsy. And I'm just like, Lord, please don't let me have to go for a biopsy. Please don't let them see anything. And lo and behold, they saw something. And I remember the radiologist came right in and she's like, we see 3 things. You're going to have to go for a biopsy. And she's like, before you go for the biopsy, you need to see the surgeon and then do the biopsy and like all this stuff. And I'm like, well, why do I have to see the surgeon? Like, I don't understand. And she's like, this is the way it's going to have to be because the biopsy is going to tell us whether you have cancer or if it's benign. So I remember I had the biopsy on a Friday, and they said it takes 3 to 5 days to get the results, which would have been the middle of the week. And I remember I got the call on Monday. I believe it was February 20th. And she called and she said, we have your results and you have cancer. And I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? And she's like, yeah. But the surgeon was like, you are going to be okay. We are going to take care of it and you're going to be okay. You are not going to die from cancer. And I remember just being devastated. Called a couple of my friends. We spoke and it was like, well, we have to see this. I have to meet with the surgeon again. And then perhaps an oncologist. You have to do an MRI. So now they know that you have cancer, but they don't know what stage it is until you get an MRI done. So the MRI then shows what stage. So they make an appointment for you to go for the MRI. You get the MRI done, then you go back to the surgeon, and that's when they let me know that it was stage 2. And basically, apparently, you're stage 2 whenever it's in your lymph nodes. So it was in my lymph nodes, so I was stage 2. And I remember I went for that appointment with one of my good friends, and the doctor was like, the surgeon was breaking everything down, and she's like, your only option is mastectomy because of the size of the cancer. She said you're gonna have to do chemo. Most likely, you're gonna have to do chemo, a mastectomy, and radiation after. And I'm like, okay. And then she's showing me pictures of different mastectomy jobs, and she's like, unfortunately, this is your only option. And then I just start crying, and she's like, I was wondering when you were going to cry because you were taking all this information and you're just like, She was like, and she's like, most patients are like boo-hooing by then. She was like, so I'm wondering when you're going to cry. And so then my friend is like, no, she's really strong, whatever. So I'm like, but yeah, mastectomy, that's hard to hear. Hearing you have cancer, especially in the beginning, it's hard to hear and it's hard to say when you speak to people. My faith was impacted in a good way after finding out that I had breast cancer. I have my circle of church sisters who I was able to text and talk to about what was going on. Definitely prayed a lot. I mean, of course, you are like, God, why is this happening to me? I do remember always being like, God has this happening to me for a reason. There's a reason why he's gonna have me go through this. I don't know why I have to be the example or the testimony, but there's a reason. Right in the beginning when I found out, Marlise was texting me and she was like, and I don't remember what was happening that morning, but I was having a really bad morning. I think it was a pity party maybe that I was having. And she was texting me and then she was like, oh, can I call? And I was texting her like, no, I don't want to talk, and the phone rang. And she called and I was like, girl, I was literally texting you like, no, I do not want to talk. I am not in a good place right now. It was just like, why is this happening to me? Why do I have to go through this? And, she spoke to me and she spoke to me about her father-in-law. And at this point, I was debating on what kind of treatment to do, because when you find out you have cancer, or breast cancer, I should say, there's sometimes a trial that's going on, and then there's also 2 chemotherapies that you can opt into. And I remember the doctor telling me that one of them can cause leukemia later on. So at first, when she gave me the options, I was like, ooh, I want that one because it was like a shorter stint of chemo. But then when she said it could cause leukemia, I'm like, I don't want that. So then there was like a trial that was going on called I Spy. And when you talk to people, a lot of people are like, oh, don't do a trial. I would just do the thing that works. And when I was talking to Marlise, she was actually sharing with me how her father-in-law had cancer and how he did a trial and they were like really scared about it, but then it turned out really good and it worked. And through talking to her about that and hearing his story, it really gave me the courage to then go ahead and pick the trial, because I was just like, I don't know what to do. And at the end of our conversation, I was like, I was texting you to tell you not to call me, but I'm so happy you did. I'm so happy that God put it on your heart to be like, let me call Andrea for whatever reason, because you actually, made me feel better. And now I'm more confident in what I'm going to choose to do. The good thing about the trial is that they do MRIs throughout your treatment. So after the second targeted treatment, I had to do an MRI, and that MRI showed that there was something going on with my lungs. And that was the same time I was like, why is this cough lasting too long? Let me look at the side effects. So I remember, I had to go and get an emergency CAT scan on my lungs, and I don't remember exactly what it showed, but it showed that there was an issue. They had to put me on steroids, had to then go to a cardiologist and a lung doctor, who put me on the same steroids, but a little longer, which then did eventually fix the lung issue. So between this, we also had to, because of the lung issue, and because of the vision, they had to stop the targeted treatment. So that was A. So when you go on the I Spy or any trial, I believe there are 3 parts. So mine's had 3 parts: A, B, and C. And the hope is all you need is A, and then you don't have to go on to B or C. Or worst case, all you need is A and B, and then you don't have to do C. Because with the trial, C was that part that caused leukemia. So now we have to stop part A because of the lung and the vision. And we can't move on to part B yet because your lungs have to be strong before you can take on full-blown chemo. So I kind of had to take a break, just continue to see the doctor until everything cleared up. It took about a month or so. So I was off of it for 3 to 4 weeks. And then we started the full-blown chemo. The full-blown chemo also gives you antibodies because I was triple positive. So in breast cancer, I don't know all the facts, but it sounds like you could be positive or negative. If you're negative, they essentially can't identify what caused the cancer. If you're triple positive, it's basically that hormones caused it. And because they can identify that, they then give you hormone blockers, which are the antibodies. So your treatment is 2 chemos and 2 antibodies. When I tell you it's a full day, as if you're going to work, it is a full day. When you go to treatment, you have to go and get blood work. And then that blood works get rushed down to the labs. Meanwhile, you see the doctor. And then after you see the doctor, you go over to the infusion room. But they still can't start anything because your blood work have to get cleared. You cannot get chemo until your blood work is cleared and they can see that everything's okay with you. So say your white blood cells were down or up, you can't get it. Calcium, any little thing that's not right, they cannot do the treatment. I remember that first weekend that I had it. I would go to the oncologist every Tuesday for follow-up blood work because everything, they got to check your blood. And I remember I went that Tuesday and I was just slumped in the chair. And one of the nurses came out and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, no, I am so weak. I can barely walk. One thing chemo definitely has is a metallic taste, and they call it metallic tongue or something like that. So it makes it very hard to eat because everything literally tastes disgusting. So now you're not only weak from the chemo, you're weak because you can barely eat. You want to eat, but everything is disgusting. So it just makes it much harder to eat. But I remember, being weak. There were some days that I had diarrhea. I don't know if that's TMI. Barely being able to eat. My chemo was every 3 weeks, and they say because it's really strong. So the first 2 weeks, you're really going through it. Your body is weak. You may be vomiting. Knock on wood, I didn't have any of that. You might be running temperatures, but your body can really go through some things when you're on the chemo. Thank God. And I'm always thank God for his grace, because all I really had was some weakness and some diarrhea. But for the most part, I was okay. And then that 3rd week before you go back is when your taste kind of starts to come back and you start to feel a little stronger. But then, of course, you go back for another round and you're right back where you started. So after the first round of chemo, we did an MRI. And the MRI showed that the cancer went from 12 centimeters to 0.87 centimeters. And after that, I met with the surgeon, and she was like, your body is responding really well to the chemo. You now have two options for surgery. And she's like, you can now do a lumpectomy or you could do a mastectomy. And I'm like, but wait a minute, you said that mastectomy was my only option. And she was like, it was, but now you have the second option. So, you're like, well, what would you do? And she's like, patients always ask me that. I will never say what I would do. She was like, all I could do is give you the facts. So she's like, if you get a mastectomy, there's a 1% chance of the cancer coming back. If you get a lumpectomy, it's a 2 to 10% chance, if I remember correctly. When we went into this, mastectomy was my only option, and we've been praying, and I have so many prayer groups praying for me, prayer warriors, just praying for me. I'm like, we've been praying and asking God for a miracle. I'm like, God has given us a miracle. He's answering our prayer. I'm like, so I think I'm going to get the lumpectomy because I really didn't want to get a mastectomy. So I'm like, he's answering my prayer. He opened another door. Like, why wouldn't I take it? And then, of course, you have the people like my mom who are like, you need to, from the beginning, you need to just get a mastectomy and that's it. And I'm like, I'm going to do whatever the doctor says I need to do. So once that door opened, I was just like, I think God has given me another option. I'm going to take the second option. And of course, in your head, you're like, I hope I'm doing the right thing, right? So I decided I'm going to do the lumpectomy. And I remember I called the surgeon and they were like, oh, okay. Most people usually do a mastectomy, but that's fine. You can do the lumpectomy. And I was like, well, you guys said like, I would be fine and, whatever. And she was like, no, it's fine. Like, there is a small percentage that do it. With that, now the oncologist is like, whenever we have your size cancer, like right away, it's just a mastectomy. Like, I don't really know if you should do a lumpectomy. So now I'm conflicted and I'm like, God has given me this door number 2 and they're telling me like this is what I should do. And I remember I said to the oncologist, I was like, well, I feel like I've been praying, and when we went into this, mastectomy was my only option. I feel like God has answered my prayers and I think I'm gonna do the lumpectomy. So she said, okay, you're gonna have another MRI and then let's get you an ultrasound, and once we do that, then we can decide on what surgery you're gonna do. So I'm like, okay, but in the back of my head, I'm still like, I'm getting a lumpectomy. I remember I went to see the plastic surgeon because they were like, before you make a decision, see the plastic surgeon. Saw the plastic surgeon and he's like, in your case, with the breast cancer, there's the lumpectomy or the mastectomy. If you do the mastectomy, you could either stay flat, you can get silicone, but because you have to have radiation after, there's a 50% chance that it might not take and you might end up with another surgery. So I'm like, not doing that in my head. And then he's like, and then there's the deep flap. They try to make it sound glamorous, but they're like, we take the fat out of your stomach and then you end up with a flat tummy, and then we move the fat out of your stomach, the tissue into your breast, and we build the breast that way. And I'm like, they're like, and you're in the hospital for like 5 days. So in my head, I'm like, not doing that either. And then he's like, and then the other one is something where they take it from your back, and it just sounded real painful. And I'm just sitting there like, all of this has convinced me that what I'm doing is a lumpectomy. I am not doing the mastectomy. And then he's like, if this was my sister, I would tell her to do the mastectomy. And I'm just looking at him and he's like, so what are you gonna do? I'm like, I'm gonna do the lumpectomy. He was like, but I just told you. I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing any of that. I'm gonna do the lumpectomy. So I go and I have 2 more rounds of cancer. And, again, every time, I'm sorry, not cancer, chemo. And again, every time you have the chemo, your body becomes more weak. You can't eat and you're just weak from the chemo and not being able to eat. I remember when I had round 4. And for my treatment, I believe the total was either 6 or 8. But again, you get those constant MRIs. So I had round 4, and when I tell you I thought I was going to die, I remember calling my director and I was like, you need to pray for me because I'm not going to die from the cancer. I am going to die from the chemo. And so again, how I'm calling my director, that's because I was working. So I worked through chemo, and I remember she was like, well, you were the one that's like, well, I'm gonna work through chemo and I'm gonna be fine. And in my head, I was like, she don't know what she is in for. She was like, so I am not surprised you're here. She was like, but you did really good. But we spoke, she prayed, really gave me strength. Then I had the next MRI. And the next MRI showed that, there was no cancer. The MRI can't read pre-cancer, but the live cancer, that showed that there was no more. So because of that, I was able to now stop the chemo, and I didn't have to do, 4 or 5. I did 4. I didn't have to do 5, 6, 7, right? So I was just like, oh my God, like, thank you, God, because I literally thought that I was going to die. Like, I'm like, I can't do any more chemo. Like, if I do more chemo, I am going to die. And they were like, no, people get through it. You're going to be okay. And I'm like, I'm not going to be okay. Because, like, after 4, like, you couldn't tell me that I wasn't going to die. So I was, like, so thankful and so grateful when I was able to stop at 4. Advice that I would give to someone who is going through this or, just on the fence on whether they should get a mammogram. Get your mammogram. It's important that we do our self-checks, but self-checks do not always work. Even when they examined me, they couldn't find it. They were only able to pinpoint it because the mammogram showed them where it was. So very important to get your mammogram and stay on top of your appointments. Another one is make sure you have a close-knit circle of positive people who are going to pour into you. I get text messages every morning to this day with a Bible scripture from 2 to 3 people. Even like sometimes when I'm going through it with the chemo and I would text like, I don't think I'm going to make it, I would get an encouraging word and a scripture. We're praying for you. We're here for you. You have to have a circle of people who are going to pour into you. And the last one, almost the most important one, is positivity. We have to stay positive. We have to stay connected with God. And we have to make sure that we understand and believe that He has us going through this for a reason and a purpose.